Well, fear stalks the homeless in Pretoria. 5 middle-aged homeless men have been killed in Muckleneuk. They were stabbed or attacked with a blunt object. So could the so-called nocturnal prowler be a serial killer? Well, Dr. Gerard Labuschagne is a forensic psychologist. He joins us now in studio. Thanks so much for coming into studio. I mean, we were discussing off air a little bit about how South Africa ranks, just some background to the story, how we rank as a country in terms of serial killers, and you were telling me it's actually higher than most people might think.
Yeah, I mean, there's different databases, and how accurate they are is another question for debate. But we tend to be kind of classified in the top 3 to 5 countries in terms of numbers of serial murders. I think we've had about 170, 180 since the mid-1990s, different series. In my 14 years in the police, I worked on 110 different murder series. So we usually used to have about 10 new murder series a year that were coming to our attention. A lot of them just never get into the media.
In terms of what qualifies, the kinds of cases that qualify as a serial case, what are the criteria?
Yeah, so look, there's lots of definitions, but the one perhaps most frequently used nowadays came from the 2005 FBI Serial Murder Symposium, where they invited a whole bunch of experts from throughout the world to debate such issues like the definition. I was very fortunate enough, SAPS sent me to attend that meeting. And the basic definition they came up with is at least 2 separate murders committed by the same individual. That's the basic crux of the criteria, 2 separate murders. Then, of course, you get the subtypes. Is it a sexually motivated murder, control, revenge, financially motivated, etc.? So the basic issue is there are 2 separate ones. So if this is the work of one individual, then yes, it would be regarded as a serial. And I think there are lots of warning signs that if I was still in the police would have triggered my concerns that this probably could be a serial. And it's always best to overreact, treat it as a serial until you have evidence to the contrary. That's the safest way to deal with these things.
Okay, so now that we've talked about the broader terms around what qualifies as serial murders, let's talk about this case in particular. It's particularly scary just because it is a vulnerable group of people, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, in essence, they usually do target vulnerable people. It's not common for homeless people to be targeted. This is very unusual, even in my own experience. So we typically would see that unemployed black females are targeted and offered a job and lured away. We don't even get that many sex worker murder series in South Africa compared to, for example, the United States. So definitely males as victims and homeless people is not a common one. Doesn't mean it's not serial. It's just a bit of an unusual sort of victimology that the person is targeting, which again is another good reason to say, you know, this, if you have a spate of these in the space of 2 weeks, that this very likely could be the work of a serial murderer. And again, until it's proven otherwise.
And I mean, you were talking about 2 separate murders, the work of one person. If this is indeed the work of one person, these are 5 separate murders. It definitely qualifies.
Yeah, and again, it's a very short time period. We have other ones such as Pandile and Chongwana in 2011 in Durban, who over the space of also I think about 2 or 3 weeks killed 4 people, decapitated I think 2 of them, attacked another 2 or 3 people and raped, or men, and then kidnapped and raped a lady. So he also had a very, very short period of time that he was operating in. So it's not that common that you get such a flurry of activity, and again, that will be cause for concern. If we don't normally have homeless people being murdered, and you have a flurry of activity, again, is another tick towards looking at this as a serial.
In terms of police being more sort of vocal about murders like this, you were talking about us having 10 serial killers in the space of a year.
New ones, yes.
In South Africa. And as you were saying, it's not something that we hear about in the news very often at all. So you might actually think that we don't have that many serial murders, when in fact the contrary is true. You're talking about us ranking in the top 3 in the world. What would stop police from putting out more information about murders like that?
Yes, we always are cautious in my time in the police about what we release into the media, because you have to look at this as the same way that you would be investigating an organized crime syndicate. You know they're going to continue committing crimes, so you don't want them to know what you know, because that causes them to change, do things differently, make it more difficult to catch them. So we have to look at it in that way. So where you might have a single once-off murder, a flood of information to the public can help you get information back. But in serial cases, because we know he's going to strike again until you catch him, you really want to be cautious about what you release, not all the details about how the people were killed, etc., etc. And also there is always a possible concern that this person might enjoy the media attention. So that sometimes is why they're hesitant to say it's a serial. For me, the big concern is not so much whether they call it a serial or whatever they label it as, but are they taking the necessary steps to deal with it? And I think in this case, they have formed a high-level task team. I know members from my old unit that specialize in serial murder investigations are involved. And I mean, those are people that have, between the 2 or 3 of them, you know, 200 or 300 serial murder investigation experience cases behind them. So as long as those people are allowed to do their job and uninterfered by senior management and given the necessary resources, and you really just need a team of 5 or 6 people, let them do what they need to do, and you probably will have a success. So for me, it doesn't matter what they're calling it, as long as we know that they are doing something about it. I think the problem with society is that when we all going, this must be a serial, and experts like me are saying it probably is a serial, and the police are saying no, we also assume that they're not investigating it properly then. And I think that's what the police don't often see, that's what the community is hearing, is that you're not doing your job properly. And 10 murders down the line, you're going to say it's a serial. Does that mean then you're going to start dealing with it effectively? Yeah. And that's, I think, where society and the police are often not talking and understanding each other. And as I said, they do seem to be doing what they should be doing at this point.
Yeah. I mean, obviously we can understand the fact that the police can't tell us everything. There are reasons for that. But there has to be that balance between protecting the investigation and making sure that people are wary enough of what's happening in their community.
Yeah, so you do always have a responsibility to let people know there is such a person active, you know, whether it's these targeting homeless people, sex workers, or as I said, typical as the unemployed female. So you do have a responsibility to say, this is a guy who's operating. Could that cause him to relocate? Yes, but at least you have the chance of people taking protective steps. Now, again, here, I think they are looking at putting as many of these homeless people into shelters, which is probably a good thing anyway. But you're probably never going to catch all of the homeless people because, you know, any piece of felt in our urban areas probably has people sleeping in it. So it's going to be difficult to get everybody. And then for how long do you house them in those environments? And the suspect can then also just move to a broader area. So again, I'm not saying that shouldn't be done, but that shouldn't be the only strategy. There should be accompanied by a proper, effective investigation, awareness, and other steps that I don't obviously want to reveal that I would think should be done.
I mean, that issue that you've just raised of the serial killer himself or herself relocating to a different area, it just tells you that there really are so many considerations that the police have with cases like this. Yeah. What they should tell the public, what the serial killer might enjoy hearing in the media. It's a difficult thing for police to manage all the different parts of a case like this.
And having said that, you know, the SAPS has well recognized for the quality of work they do with serial murder investigations specifically. I mean, I used to go to the FBI and give training, to other law enforcement agencies, give advice. So there's not a lack of expertise in, for example, the investigative psychology unit. You know, if I spoke to my colleagues who are profilers, some of them at the FBI and some of them at other organizations, they might have worked on 1 or 2 murder series in their whole careers. As I said, I've worked on over 110. Colonel De Lange, Colonel Meyerberg have probably also exceeded that number of cases now that are still at the unit. So there's people there that know what to do. We train detectives every year on 2 or 3 times a year on how to investigate these cases and identify them, which is something that other law enforcement don't do. We have a national DNA database, so we pick up a lot of our serials from that resource. So we have so many things in place that other law enforcement agencies don't have to help us deal with these cases and very effectively. So we've got some very good speedy records for arrests of these suspects. We've had a 100% conviction rate with these types of trials. So definitely that's one thing we can definitely hold up as a shining light for SAPS. But again, as I say, the caveat is, as long as we don't get generals sticking their noses in and trying to play detective, and we leave these team of people to do what they're good at and give them the resources and the space to do it, I think you will have the best chance of solving this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a two-edged sword, isn't it, that we have all of this great experience in dealing with serial killers. Just perhaps as a parting shot, this case in particular, 5 middle-aged homeless men killed in this area in Pretoria. Is there anything for you that stands out regarding this case and any sort of special measures you're looking for police to put in place?
I think if they do the standard stuff, they'll be fine. As I said, it's unique because it's homeless people. Unique because it's a very short time period. We don't often get such a fast spate of murders. We're more likely to get that as a series develops. So then, of course, the next question arises, are these the first ones? We might have had sporadically one in the Brooklyn police station area, Sunnyside police station area, Garsfontein police station in the past year. And that's one of the things that they will be doing, is looking back into the records of the neighboring jurisdiction stations for old cases and people who were attacked but not murdered and might have gone to the police and reported a robbery, or not gone to the police at all. And I think there have been some people who have come forward and said, I was attacked. And those are going to become valuable sources of information for them to get a better idea about the suspect.
Yeah, let's hope that we get to the bottom of what's happening in Pretoria. Thanks very much for coming into studio. Some interesting perspective there from Dr. Gerard Labuschagne. He's a forensic psychologist, formerly with the police, as we continue to track the story around these 5 middle-aged homeless men killed in Muckleneuk in Pretoria.